Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, how the bloody hell are we? And welcome back. I know it's been a minute since I've uploaded a video, but I've actually been working on a pretty massive video, if I'm honest. It's a how-to guide of using Poly Resin. So it's everything you need to know for poly repairs. It's going to be quite in-depth. Just the intro alone, I think, came to like 20-25 minutes. So it's still not edited. I don't know if I'm going to release it as like a series or maybe the whole thing, but I'll decide when it's done. Maybe I'll release it as both. But in the process of editing, I've just discovered this little snippet that I'm tying together, and I thought maybe it's worthwhile uploading this little section now. It'll still be in the full-length video, but it might save someone some hassle in the coming days if you're about to pour some resin and make this mistake. So without any further ado, I'm just going to leave you to watch this little clip. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It is the next day and we're going to continue with this poly experiment, but before we move on, I want to show you this board. Now the board itself is not particularly interesting. It's just a standard 7S Superfish. Of course, it has nothing to do with a fish surfboard in the slightest. 5 fin boxes, swallowtail. What about it is a fish? I have no idea. But the interesting thing is, if we have a look at the construction of this board, we have our wooden stringer. We have a clear resin job, so we can see through the resin that this is a PU blank. So we could make an sort of initial assumption that this is a poly resin construction over a PU blank. When we come down to the tail end here though, we do have this mark which says PE. As we've discussed, PE is PU foam, epoxy resin, so it is epoxy construction. And as I've reiterated a few times in this video, because it is epoxy construction, we must fix it with epoxy. Poly resin does not go over epoxy resin. But if we have a read of the fine print under this PE stamp, it says repair with epoxy or polyester resin. Now I've actually never seen that before, or maybe I've just never noticed that before, but that is worth pointing out as bullshit. Do not put poly resin over epoxy resin. It just doesn't work particularly well. The materials don't like that combination. It will fail in the end, guarantee. It might fail in a month, it might fail in a year, it might fail in 2 years. You have no way of knowing. Just don't put poly resin on top of epoxy resin. So here's how our ding looked in the beginning. So the first step, of course, is to sand it. Same as any repair, I sanded it in this area, and that was just to get rid of these sort of peeling resin edges and feather them back. So the next step after sanding is normally to blow the board off, getting ready to apply some resin, and this is exactly what happened originally. So we'll give it another sand to feather those edges back, and we'll blow it off again, getting ready for our first resin pour. Or we'll just blow more resin off the lamination. So now I know that none of this resin is adhered to the cloth of the board. So if I do my repair over the top and that original resin lifts, it's going to lift my repair right off the board. I can't guarantee this repair. This, ladies and gentlemen, is why we don't put poly resin over epoxy laminations. Don't do it. This is inevitable. I hope your shaper knows more better. Now why, I hear you ask, would a repairer or a manufacturer put poly resin over epoxy resin? Well, there's a few different reasons. One would be cost. So poly resin is far cheaper than epoxy resin. So from a repairer's perspective, it's going to cost me a lot less to repair this 7S Superfish with poly rather than epoxy. Also, curing time. I can have that repair done in a day or two and sand it with poly, but with epoxy the curing time is much longer. So from a shaper's or a manufacturer's perspective, they're going to do it probably for reasons of gloss. Poly resin glosses or polishes and buffs much shinier than epoxy resin. Epoxy is really difficult to get like a good mirror finish without adding clear coats afterwards. There's also the time crunch as well, and there's also the cost factor too. But gloss seems to be the most common reason people put poly resin over their epoxy laminations. Now, there are always people out there who will claim that it can be done, you just need to know how to do it. And if you say it can't be done, then you just don't know the secret sauce to putting poly over epoxy. Now, the reason I'm so adamant that you can't put poly over epoxy is because of my career as a ding repairer. So I've repaired a lot of boards that are poly over epoxy, and they have been failing, and that's why they've been brought to me. And as a result of that, I've actually spoken to 3 individual shapers, all of which have been shaping longer than I've been alive, so more than 38 years. So certainly not like new, definitely good at their craft and legends in their own respect. And all of them that I've rung to ask them, is this board of yours that I'm repairing poly over epoxy, all of them have said, yes, God, not another one, and stopped doing that practice a long time ago. Because they were doing it to save their money, to save their time, to get a good gloss finish, but then the boards eventually would come back to them and it would cost them a small fortune to fix the problem that they had created for their customer. And in some cases the boards came back straight away, like the one we saw in the video just moments ago, or they've come back years down the track. So those guys are certainly not new to the industry, they certainly know a lot better than I do, they have a lot more experience than I do, and they have done this practice enough to learn that it is not worth it and it doesn't work. And I just frankly don't believe that these guys just don't know how to do it. It's interesting to me that people who claim that, hey, you can do it and I do it all the time and I've never had a problem, none of them have actually tested their boards for a significantly long time like these 3 individual shapers that I've spoken to over the years. So maybe you've made a board, maybe you've coated epoxy with poly, and 2 years later you've never had it brought back to you. Maybe you've just never heard from the ding repairer what happened to that board eventually, or maybe the inevitable just hasn't happened yet. Once you've given those boards 10, 15, 20 years and they're still not just peeling every ounce of resin off them, then okay, we might be onto something. And there's always an exception to the rule, but generally speaking, the message of this video is do not put poly resin over epoxy. And that doesn't matter if it's a repair, like this Superfish is trying to tell us, or if you're shaping a brand new board in epoxy and you're trying to save on some money and you're trying to get a shiny board and maybe you want it all done today and you don't want to wait 24 hours for curing time. I understand, but just don't do it. It's not worth it in the long run. Anyway, that's it guys. Hope you're well, and we'll see you very soon for the full video that this little snippet has been taken from. Cheers guys. Choo-hoo!